everyone, welcome back to day 10 lecture of how to learn DevOps and cloud computing in 60 days. In today's lecture, we are going to learn about something called declarative pipeline, and we will compare declarative pipeline with scripted pipeline. We will understand the difference between these two, and we will also talk about what are some of the limitations of scripted pipeline and then why we should go for something called declarative pipeline. And finally, we will implement CI/CD using declarative pipeline for the Java web app that we have already configured in GitHub repository. All right. So now let's talk about what are some of the limitations of scripted pipeline. Generally speaking, whenever you are writing a scripted pipeline code, you need to have stronger groovy scripting knowledge. This doesn't follow very simple pipeline script. So this is not going to be very easy, especially for people who is completely new to Jenkins, isn't it? And then whenever you are writing scripted pipeline code, since you are going to write a lot of complex scripting and all, which will actually make your pipeline code less readable and then less maintainable, isn't it? And one more drawback of scripted pipeline is, for example, let's say you have created pipeline with various stages. If one of your stages is failing, you wouldn't be able to restart from where you actually stopped. But when you actually take declarative pipeline, you would be able to restart from where the pipeline stage got failed. But scripted pipeline does not have that capability. And scripted pipeline does not have any native audit logging. So when it comes to exceptional handling, you'll have to handle by yourself. But when you actually take declarative pipeline, it has something called post block. So depending on the status of pipeline run, success or failure, you would be able to easily perform exceptional handling. And then scripted pipeline does not follow any standard structure, isn't it? When you take declarative pipeline, you can have stages block, and then each and every stages block, you can have steps block, and then you can also have script block inside the steps block, right? But scripted pipeline does not follow any standard structure. So that's the reason why you should go for something called declarative pipeline. So if you look at the sample code, so this is your pipeline code for your declarative pipeline. So let's say that you wanted to execute your pipeline on a build agent. You can easily specify like this, but if you wanted to perform your build either on master or any agent, then you can say agent any. And then each and every stage, you're going to define inside the stages block. So this is on the bigger level, and then all the stage should be defined inside the stages block. And then each and every stage you need to have steps block, and then you would have your pipeline script inside the steps block. It is pretty straightforward and then pretty standard. So you don't need to have very stronger scripting knowledge in order to implement declarative pipeline code. And like I said, you would be able to restart from any stages in case any of your pipeline stage got failed in declarative pipeline. So declarative pipeline is recommended over scripted pipeline. So if you look at this diagram, this clearly articulates about Jenkins pipelines. So if you see here, so this is your CI part of it, and then this is your CD part of it. So using Jenkins pipeline, you would be able to implement both CI and CD. So as part of CI implementation, as soon as development team commits the code, you want to check out the code, start your build process, and then you would perform various code quality check as part of CI, such as code coverage check, a static code analysis check, and then you would also perform SAS scanning. And then once everything is good, you would be packaging it and then uploading into repository manager, and then you can deploy the code into dev environment, and then you will be notifying development team saying that the build is done. And then once the development team verifies their code changes in dev environment, then you are ready to push the code into next environment, right? So that's where your CD comes in. So continuous delivery is nothing but a way of deploying your code in the higher environment, isn't it? With some kind of a semi-automated process. So this is where you would be including some key stakeholders in the approval process. So that's the reason why, you have to go for pipeline, because using Jenkins freestyle job, you wouldn't be able to achieve the continuous delivery part of it, isn't it? So in previous lecture, we talked about scripted pipeline, but in this lecture, we are going to implement declarative pipeline. All right. So now let's get started, guys. So if you look at the prerequisites, you need to have Java web app configured in GitHub. So this is a Java web app that we have already configured in GitHub. And then you need to have Jenkins up and running. So this is my Jenkins, which is already configured in AWS Cloud. And this is your Tomcat, which needs to be up and running. So this is my Tomcat, which is up and running. And then SonarQube needs to be up and running. So this is my SonarQube, which is already configured and integrated as part of Jenkins. And Nexus needs to be up and running. So this is our Nexus. So this is also integrated with Jenkins as well. And then we need to have Aqua Trivy Scanner installed for SAS scanning. So we can quickly verify if Aqua Trivy Scanner is installed. There you go. So this is my Jenkins. I'm connected through iTerm. And then we also need to have Slack workspace configured, because we would be sending Slack notification back to development team. So this is the channel that I have configured as part of my Slack workspace. Fantastic. And then we also need to have JUnit test added, because we are going to build the code using Maven, and then we will also execute the unit test, and we will also perform code coverage using Jacoco plugin. So I have already added some unit tests as part of the Java source code. I have added some service, and then I also have added some unit tests for the service as well. Fantastic. So we do have all the prerequisites configured. And then very importantly, Jenkins also needs to have all the plugins configured as well. If you go to Manage Jenkins, Manage Plugins, if you go to Install Plugins, I do have all the plugins configured, like SonarQube plugin, Nexus plugin, and Jacoco plugin, and then Slack plugin, right? And then most importantly, pipeline stage view plugin, because you need to install that pipeline stage view plugin. Otherwise, you would not be able to view the output of the pipeline stages. So this plugin also needs to be installed. Fantastic. So we do have all the prerequisites configured. So now let's go ahead and then create a declarative pipeline for the Java web app that we have already configured in GitHub. So let me go back to Jenkins. Before I get started, so this is a sample, a scripted pipeline code that we have already configured as part of previous lecture. So we talked about some of the limitations of scripted pipeline, like, no audit trail. You wouldn't be able to restart from, the failed stage or anything like that, right? And then pipeline code also kind of exposed as part of, your Jenkins UI. But again, right, what we are going to do, we are going to fix all of this thing. We are going to go ahead and then implement declarative pipeline. So let me click on new item. So I'm going to call this as my declarative pipeline job, and click on pipeline and click on OK. So now how do you want to trigger your pipeline code? So we are going to trigger using webhooks. So let me enable this option. Okay. Again, right, depending on how you wanted to trigger your pipeline, you can actually do it. There are so many ways you can trigger your pipeline jobs or freestyle jobs. I can quickly show you. So you can clearly see here, right? Whenever you are creating your Jenkins job, there are so many ways you can trigger your Jenkins build job. You can configure Polasium, you can configure webhooks, or you can also, kickstart your Jenkins job from a Slack channel, or you can also kickstart your Jenkins job from another Jenkins job as well. Okay, but as part of our lecture, we are going to trigger using webhooks. Fantastic. So now let's go ahead and then implement pipeline. So you can actually start with the hello world. So this would actually give you a basic template, right? Isn't it? So this will actually give you a basic template for you to, build on top of it. So this will give you a basic template by which, you can start implementing your pipeline. So what is our first stage? It's supposed to be checkout. So how are you going to generate code for checkout? Our code is committed in GitHub. So it's pretty straightforward. You can leverage something called pipeline syntax. And then go here, look for Git, because our source code is in Git, and copy the repo URL. Okay, so right now it is failing because we don't have any credentials configured in GitHub. So in order for Jenkins to check out from GitHub, you need to have pat configured. So let's quickly configure that. So go to settings and developer settings, pat, classic. So let me generate a new token. I'm going to say my pat Jenkins. I'm going to just keep it 7 days. Again, based on your company's password policy, you can, expire your tokens. Generate token. There you go. So that's the pat. So the pat got created. So now let's go ahead and then add into Jenkins. Let me go to manage Jenkins and go to credentials. Click on add credentials. So my GitHub username is this. And let's copy and paste the pat. So I'm going to say GitHub pat create. And let's go ahead and then select it from the drop down. There you go. Fantastic. So the error is gone, and then the branch name is main. So that's it, right? So that's the code for checking out from GitHub. Let's go back to our pipeline. So let's go ahead and then paste the code over here. Fantastic. So click on apply and save. So before I go too far, I just want to make sure that we are able to kickstart our pipeline. Okay. So now we are able to check out the code from GitHub. Fantastic. So let's go back to pipeline. So the next stage is build, right? So for this, we are going to use Maven. So we have already configured Maven as part of our tools. So if we go to tools, Maven installation. So you can see here, right? So we are going to use this variable. So let's declare our Maven variable over here. And then we are going to use that over here. Maven clean install. So that's the code for performing build using Maven. And this is the path of the pom.xml file. So if I can go back, if you see here, the pom.xml file resides inside a my web app folder. So that's the reason why, you'll have to explicitly, provide the path of pom.xml file. If the pom.xml file is in the root of the repository, then you don't have to specify anything. Maven will assume that pom.xml file is there in the root of the repository. Fantastic. So this should take care of, performing Maven build. So apply and save. Click on build now. So it is always a good idea to build your pipeline stage by stage. I see some failure. Why? Because we have not added the steps block. Go back, pipeline. There you go. So that's a lesson learned for us. So let's go ahead and then add steps block here. Perfect. So apply and save. Click on build now. All right. So Maven build is done. So what is the next stage? So let's go back to our pipeline diagram. So you can see here, so we can start performing unit tests and code coverage. So as part of this particular stage, we are going to perform unit test execution and code coverage. So for unit test, we are going to use JUnit, and then for coverage, we are going to integrate with Jacoco. So for JUnit, we have to write the code. So I'm going to say JUnit So this should take care of, exporting the JUnit test execution into some kind of a report. So for viewing the JUnit test, so this is how we are going to export the JUnit test as part of our Jenkins build output. So I have already added Maven Surefire plugin here. So if I can take you guys back to pom.xml file. So you can see here, right? So I have already added Maven Surefire plugin in order to view the JUnit test as part of our Jenkins build. Okay. And then let's also go ahead and then view a code coverage as well. So how do you generate code for code coverage? So you can go back here and then look for Jacoco. So that is a code for performing code coverage using Jacoco. So let's go ahead and then copy and paste here. Fantastic. So this should take care of exporting the JUnit test as well as performing code coverage using Jacoco. So click on apply and save. Click on build now. All right, so go back to the pipeline. There you go, guys. So we can see here. So this is our Jacoco code coverage report. Fantastic. And we are also able to see the JUnit test results here as well. You all can see here, right? Okay, I only have one unit test, which is actually passed. Fantastic. Okay. So far so good. So as you can see here, another major advantage of pipeline is you can clearly see how long each and every stage is taking time to execute. So you can easily troubleshoot. So let's go back. Now let's continue adding our pipeline stages. So the next stage is going to be code analysis. So I'm going to say code analysis. Do not forget the steps block. And we are going to integrate with the SonarQube. So this is our SonarQube, which is already configured. I also have integrated SonarQube as well from my Jenkins. So you can see here, we have already integrated SonarQube with Jenkins by adding token and whatnot. Fantastic. So now let's go back here. So how are you going to generate code for performing code scan? So you can go back to your pipeline syntax or snippet generator. So look for SonarQube here, type with SonarQube environment or something. There you go. And this is a sample code for you. So you can at least use this to build that stage. So if you all remember, this is the SonarQube variable name. So I'm going to use that. And we are going to use Maven in order to integrate with SonarQube by adding Maven goal. So let's add that. So we are going to use Maven to integrate with SonarQube. So that is nothing but sonar:sonar. So this should take care of integrating with SonarQube. So you can also combine build and code scan stages. So you can just have Maven clean install and then sonar:sonar if you wanted. But I just wanted to separate out each and every stages clearly so that you know what's going on. So click on apply and save and click on build now. Fantastic. So build is done and we can clearly see here code scan was done and it took about 21 seconds, isn't it? So now let's actually go back to SonarQube. Click on projects. There you go, guys. So you can clearly see here we were able to integrate with SonarQube, and you can clearly see here 45 seconds ago we were able to integrate with SonarQube, right? But as of now there are no defects in the code, so that's good. So let's continue building our pipeline. So what is the next stage right after you perform code scan? So let's go back to our pipeline view. So you can see here we can perform SAS scanning. So for that we are going to use a tool called AquaTrivy. So I'm going to add a new stage and steps block, and I'm going to say SAS scanning, and we have already installed Trivy in Jenkins, right? So we are going to directly perform scan using Trivy. So we are going to say Trivy FS stand for file system, and then you can just provide the path of your web app. So this should take care of performing scanning of our source code. So what Trivy will actually do is it will actually scan through the source code. It will check for any dependencies, and then it will try to perform vulnerability scanning on those dependencies. Fantastic. I think this should take care of it. So let's go ahead and then click on apply and save. Click on build now. So you can see here Trivy scan started. Wow. Fantastic. So Trivy was able to scan through the source code, and then it was able to find like 4 vulnerabilities. So you can see here, so it actually picked up this particular file, and then it found out about 4 different vulnerabilities. And then we can also see what type of vulnerabilities, right? You can see here. So like I said, it is going to check your dependencies. So we have included some dependencies in our pom.xml file, and then it was able to scan them, and then found these vulnerabilities. Fantastic. So we are not responsible to fix it. We have to let development team know, so they should take corrective actions. Okay, not a problem. So let's move on. So what is the next stage, guys? Go back to pipeline. And if you see here, the next stage is, we need to upload the binary file into Nexus. After that, we are going to deploy into our web container, and then finally we are going to send a Slack notification. So everything is actually part of CI build. Okay. So let's get back here. So I'm going to say binary upload. All right. So how are we going to generate code for uploading the WAR file into Nexus? So let's get back here. Look for Nexus as part of snippet generator. And our Nexus version is 3. Nexus URL. So this is the Nexus URL. You don't have to put the protocol. It is mentioned over here, so not needed. And then credentials. So I have already added Nexus admin credentials, and then it is asking for group ID and all. So you'll have to go back to pom.xml file. So this is the group ID. Version. So this is the version as of now. I'm not planning for any release, so I'm going to go with the snapshot version. And then repository. So we are going to actually upload our WAR file into this repository, which comes out of the box from Nexus. So let's use that, and then click on add. So it is asking for the artifact ID. So this is our artifact ID. Type, so WAR file. You can also actually see that over here as well, line number 6. And then it is asking for file. So basically we are going to pick up from our workspace. So we already know. I will also show you guys where this is actually coming from. So let me quickly take you guys to my Jenkins workspace directory. So you can see here, so this is the pipeline that we are building. So go inside that folder. So you can see my web app folder, and then you will also see target folder. And then that's the WAR file, right? So basically you're actually giving a path of your WAR file from your pipeline job folder. Fantastic. So that's what we have mentioned over here. So all good. So go ahead and then click on generate pipeline script and copy everything. And let's go ahead and then paste in between steps block. So that should do it. So let's also go ahead and then deploy our WAR file into Tomcat as well. So deploy WAR. And how are we going to generate code? So go back here. So remember, we already installed the plugin deploy war/share container plugin. So select that one. And then add container. So Tomcat version is 9. So we have already added Tomcat credentials. And then it is asking for Tomcat URL. So that is nothing but this one. Fill that in. That's it, right? And click on generate pipeline script. There you go. That's it. So you don't need to know scripting really well in order to implement declarative pipeline code. I know we are actually using Jenkins UI in order to generate pipeline code. Eventually, once we generate the pipeline code, we are going to move the pipeline code into our GitHub repository as a Jenkins file. And then we would be, checking out from GitHub. So the reason why I'm actually using Jenkins UI is this is easier to troubleshoot and all. This is only for development, but once you fully develop the pipeline code, you need to commit into your GitHub repository. Okay. So before we go too far, let's quickly make sure we are able to run our pipeline. Click on build now. I understand I'm actually, starting the pipeline manually, but in a real-time scenario, once you generate the, pipeline code, you're going to hand over to development team. So something got failed. Let's find out. Okay. Unknown stage section deploy. So I think this does not have a steps block. Again, you all need to be careful. So anytime you are writing a new stage, it needs to have steps block. Apply and save. Click on build now. Wow. So the pipeline execution is done. So let's quickly validate whether the WAR file have been uploaded into Nexus or not. So let's go into Nexus. Go into Maven snapshots. So you can see the WAR file that has been uploaded from Jenkins pipeline. Fantastic. So let's also go into Tomcat and then verify whether we got the build output or not. Wow. There you go, guys. Fantastic. So we have successfully, deployed our Java web application into a Tomcat container. So let's go back to our pipeline. So what is the next stage? So our next stage is, sending Slack notification to development team. So this is actually, the final stage of CI. Okay. So let's go back here. Let's finish CI. So let's go ahead and then, send Slack notification. I'm going to say Slack dev, or I'm going to say dev notify. Steps block, don't forget steps block. And then go back to your snippet generator. look for Slack, and then the channel. So this is our channel, right? So this is our channel, and then let's say, hi dev team, we have deployed code into dev environment. Please start smoke testing in dev environment. Generate pipeline script, there you go. So that is a code for sending Slack notification to development team. Paste it. Fantastic, right? So with this, our CI part is complete from pipeline standpoint, correct? So we can also add some comments here. I'm going to say CI pipeline ends here. Okay. All right. So now as you can see here, the pipeline is being, triggered based on the code changes. So whenever we actually make a code change, it should immediately trigger the pipeline. Okay, because we have already configured the webhooks. So I can also show you here. If you go to settings, webhooks, and you can see here, we have already configured a webhook. So this is our Jenkins URL, 112.37, right? So our webhook has been configured. So now as soon as I actually make a code change, it should trigger the pipeline, isn't it? So why don't we just test the CI part of the pipeline? Okay. So let's go back to our code here. I'm going to say git pull. Okay. So let's go ahead and then go to my web app. And let's edit this file. So I'm going to say, hi team, we are implementing CI/CD using Jenkins Declarative Pipeline. Okay. So let me say git add, git commit. I'm going to say adding triggering pipeline, and then git push. So I committed my code and then I push my code. If I go into GitHub, so there you go. So you can see the code changes, right? So this was the code change. So now our pipeline should have been triggered. There you go, guys. So you all heard the sound. So we were also able to send the Slack notification as well. So you can see here, Slack notification also have, send out to dev team. So now they can actually start testing their code changes in dev environment, isn't it? So let me go into dev environment. There you go. You all see here? Fantastic, right? So basically we have just completed the CI part of implementing declarative pipeline. So if I can take you guys back to the pipeline view. So we have done this part, right? So now what is the next stage? So the next stage is obviously, implementing CD. So what is the next part of it? So now we have implemented CI. So what do you think we'll have to do next? So we'll have to implement CD, right? So which is nothing but continuous delivery. So this is where, so now we have implemented continuous integration. So now we have to go ahead. So now we have implemented continuous integration. So the next part is continuous delivery. So this is where, it is going to be a bit tricky. Why? Because you are actually including some key stakeholders in the approval process. So they have to approve or reject based on how the testing actually goes. Okay. So this is the flow that we are actually going to follow, right? So if you see here, yes, we are deploying into dev. We will also deploy into QA environment, and then we will also deploy into production environment, right? So only three environments, right? Like dev, QA, and production. So now we have deployed our code changes into dev environment, right? So now let's try to understand the flow. So development team goes into dev environment. So they validated their code changes, and then they are going to give a heads up to dev manager for deploying the code changes into QA environment, right? So you can see here, so the next stage is we are going to have an approval stage in order to deploy the code changes into QA environment, and then we will go ahead and then deploy the code changes into QA environment, and then after that we are going to send notification to a QA team, okay, through Slack, and then we may give again depending on the requirement, right? 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, right? So we will send them notification. So they would have 1 or 2 weeks to test their code changes. They will find bugs, and then they are going to give all the bugs. So they are going to find bugs, and then they are going to notify development team in order to fix those defects, right? And then once they fix it, again, right, they're going to make their code changes. Now let's say once they fix all the defects in a QA environment, now the next stage is we have to move into production deployment, right? So for that someone from the stakeholders like QA manager or product owner, so they have to give an approval for production deployment. So once you deploy into production environment, we will go ahead and then send Slack notification. So that is how we are going to implement continuous delivery. So we are going to create this workflow where key stakeholders would be involved in necessary approval process. All right, fantastic, guys. So now let's go ahead and then implement continuous delivery. So the CI is ended with the Slack notification, right? So now we have to start working on from here. Okay. So let's start with the approval stage for deploying code into QA environment, and then deploy into QA environment, and then send the Slack notification. So basically 3 different stages over here, correct? So let's get back to our pipeline, configure pipeline. So I'm going to say CD pipeline starts here. So I'm going to say dev manager approval. Taking approval from dev manager for QA deployment. I'm going to say I'm going to give them 2 hours, but again, depending on the requirement, 4 hours, 2 hours. So you can customize it. And then I want to say the input message, right? Which is going to be kind of a pop-up. So before they approve, they can actually see that message. So I'm going to ask, do you approve QA deployment? And then you can include the dev manager email address over here. So they would be, getting that notification. So you can also use, Slack as well. If you want to notify it through Slack channel, you can also do that. Okay. And then let's go ahead and then start with a QA deployment. Let's assume that, they're going to deploy. So the next stage is going to be QA deploy. So once the development manager approves, we want to go ahead with the QA deployment. So for QA, I'm going to use the same Tomcat, guys. Okay, so I know I mentioned Tomcat dev here. So what we are going to do is, we are going to leverage the same Tomcat instance for dev, QA, and production. So just to simplify our demo, but in a real-time use case scenario, you are going to have 3 different instances, right? One for dev, one for QA, one for production. Okay, but I'm going to deploy into same Tomcat instance. So this is the code. And then right after that, we can go ahead and then send Slack notification, correct? I'm going to say QA notify, and then this is where you can actually include a QA team member. So I already have a Slack channel created. Okay, and then I'm going to say hi QA team. We have deployed into QA environment. Please start, functional testing in QA environment. Fantastic. So now let's go ahead and then implement this workflow. So as you can see here, so we are trying to implement CD. So we are starting with dev manager approval. Once they approve, we want to go ahead and then deploy our code changes into QA environment. And then right after that, we want to, send a Slack notification to QA team so that they can start testing their code changes in a QA environment, right? So let's actually just test this before we go ahead and then implement production deployment, okay? So click on apply and save. So the way I'm going to trigger this pipeline is by making some code changes, since we have already configured webhooks, isn't it? So let me make some code changes now. So I'm going to say, hi team, this is feature 1 we are implementing in both dev and QA environment. Okay, so let me make some code changes. Again, right, in a real-time scenario, this will be actual live code, but just for demo purpose, I'm just playing around. So let's go ahead and then commit the code. So I'm going to say testing code changes and then git push. So as soon as you perform git push, this should go ahead and then kickstart the pipeline. So there you go, guys. So pipeline got triggered. So we all heard the sound. So it says that, so for example, the first one to be notified is obviously the development team, right? So you can see here, the dev team got notification saying that, code has been deployed. So they can go ahead and then verify their code changes. There you go. So they were able to see the code changes. And then they can actually inform the dev manager, and they can actually give a thumbs up to dev manager. Then dev manager can go ahead and then give an approval, correct? So that's what you actually see here. So if I can show you in the pipeline view, so can you all see here, right? So developer manager can log in into Jenkins, and then he can either perform proceed or abort depending on the status of dev build. Now let's say in this case, since everything is working fine, so dev manager is okay to give an approval for QA deployment, and then he can go ahead and then click on proceed. So did you all hear that sound? So now the code also has been deployed into QA environment, and then we also notified everyone, right? So if I can go back to a Slack, so we also notified the dev team. We also notified the testing team as well. So you all see here. So we also notified the testing team as well. Fantastic. So now the testing team, they will go ahead and then, validate the code changes in a QA environment, right? So again, right, this will take a week or two depending on, the severity of the project, depending on the criticality of the project. So they may find some bugs. So they would be able to, provide the feedback back to development team, right? So if you look at the overall CI/CD process implementation diagram, so you see this diagram, right? So right after QA deployment, and then they can give the feedback back to development team, and then development team they may work on all the code changes, bug fixes and all, and then again they can actually commit the code. So that is going to trigger the pipeline all over again. And again you would be deploying the code changes into dev environment, and then deploy into QA environment, and then again development team can go ahead and then verify all the code changes. Now let's say once everything is good, they can actually go ahead and then deploy the code changes into production environment. I understand this diagram has a UAT environment, but in our lecture, in our demo, we are not actually using UAT. We are just using only 3 environment: dev, QA and production, right? So now we were able to deploy into QA environment. We were able to notify them. Now let's say that everything is fine. So QA team is kind of giving a thumbs up to a product owner or QA manager for moving the code into next environment, in our case production environment. So now let's go ahead and then implement production deployment. So we will have to implement these 3 stages. So one for approval, and then one for deployment, and then final one for sending Slack notification. So go to configure, go to pipeline. So the next stage is QA manager approval. So I'm going to copy and paste the code just to save time here. So taking approval from QA manager for production deployment. Do you approve production deployment? And then you can actually include a QA manager in the approval process, right? And then let's add code for production deploy. So that's the code for production deploy. And then we also need to have a code for sending Slack notification. So I'm going to call this as final notify. And if you wanted to include a product owner as part of the Slack notification, you can do that as well. So that's the channel name. Copy that. So let's go ahead and then paste that. And then we can also change the message saying that, hi PO team, nothing but the product owners team. Hi PO team, we have deployed code into production environment. Please inform end customers. So that's it, right? Okay, I think everything is looking good. So click on apply and save. So now how to test this? So now we have actually implemented end-to-end pipeline, right? We have implemented end-to-end pipeline. So now our job is pretty much done. So once you kind of validate your code changes, you can hand over the pipeline to development team or agile team or scrum team, and then they will be start using the pipeline, correct? But let's actually go ahead and then test our final stages of the pipeline. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make another code change here, and I'm going to say, okay, so let's say I want to add this message. Say git add, git commit. I'm going to say final launch, and then git push. So now if I go back to pipeline, this should have triggered the pipeline, correct? Let's verify that. There you go. So pipeline got triggered, and you can see here, fantastic. So you all heard the sound, right? If I go into a dev team channel, it says that the code has been deployed. So let me verify the code changes here. So there you go. And then as a dev manager, dev manager can log in into Jenkins. For example, let's say dev manager is logging in. So they can click on the pipeline. Now let's say development team have given an approval for dev manager to approve. So he can click on proceed. There you go. So now the code also has been deployed into QA environment. Now let's say QA team is taking a week or two to test their code changes. Now the QA team also can give a thumbs up to the stakeholder. It could be QA team manager or product owner for deploying the code changes into production environment, right? Now let's say that the QA manager or the key stakeholder is okay with the production deployment, and then they can also give an approval here, proceed. There you go. So now the code has been deployed into production environment, and we also send final notification as well. So if I can go into Slack, so there you go. So we send notification to product owner as well, saying that production deployment is done. So they can start doing whatever they want, like doing some basic validation before they can inform to end customers. And of course you can always see the code changes are working fine, right? So yeah, this is how, guys, this is how you can actually implement declarative pipeline job. I'm not done yet. Why? Because the pipeline code is still exposed in Jenkins. So we'll have to create as a Jenkins file and then move our pipeline code as part of our SCM. In our case, we are using GitHub, right? So let's copy the pipeline code. So go into your local workspace. So remember, we have been adding code from here. So you can actually create a file called Jenkins file. It's all one word. Let me clear the screen actually. So you'll be creating a file called Jenkins file, all one word, enter. And then you're going to paste the code over here, the entire code. There you go. So let me say git add and then git commit. I'm going to say added Jenkins file to create declarative pipeline. So I haven't pushed that code yet. So now let's get back to our pipeline here. So I'm going to change from pipeline script to pipeline script from SCM. I'm going to choose git, and then we are going to add our repo URL. That's the repo URL. And then let's add our GitHub credentials. Wonderful. Change the branch name to main. So that's the correct branch name. Apply and save. So that's it, right? So now if you actually see here, so no one can mess up with the pipeline code, isn't it? Why? Because you have created a Jenkins file and then you have moved your Jenkins file as part of your code base. So now anyone who wants to make any code changes to the pipeline, they need to have access to the source code. So I have not pushed that code changes yet. So let me go ahead and then say git push. There you go. So if I go back to GitHub and then if I say refresh, you all see here. So now we have created a declarative pipeline code. We have committed that as part of our source code. So obviously now pipeline will be triggered because we committed our Jenkins file. And you can also see here as well, obtain Jenkins file from GitHub, right? So this confirms that, this is able to check out from Jenkins file. So one thing to note here is, you can see here, it is doing 2 times checkout, right? Why? Because if I can take you guys back to the Jenkins file. So you see here, so you have already added a checkout stage here, right? So this is actually not needed. Why? Because pipeline already knows where the source code is. So you can actually delete this. Okay, you can actually start with the build stage. Okay, so let me say git add and then git commit. I'm going to say removed checkout stage, and then I'm going to say git push. There you go. So now if I go back to the pipeline job, so I know this is actually waiting for the approval. I'm going to say abort. So now you can see here uptime Jenkins file, but you will see it checked out only once, isn't it? You can see that here, right? So yes, guys, so this is how you can actually implement declarative pipeline using Jenkins for the Java web app that we have already configured in GitHub repository. I hope this video was really useful. I'm really looking forward to see you all in the next upcoming lecture. Thank you so much.